If you had to guess, what percentage of your life did you believe that movement was only for weight loss or for punishment? Mine's probably like, I don't know, 70%. If I'm actually not doing the math. If I were to sit down and write it all out, it might not be that, but it feels like most of my life I believed that movement was for weight loss. That was the purpose of it. It was for punishment, weight loss, to earn food, that kind of thing, whether I explicitly thought it or implicitly thought it. And I know that I'm not alone in this. A lot of people who have been through eating disorders or who have, experienced diet culture, which is most of us, we've had that belief at some point or another. And today I want to talk about reframing your movement practice, reframing your why for movement. My name is Billie. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her. This is Rebel Movement Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm really excited to be back here in 2025. And I did take, I don't even know, a bit of a break, like a month or something. And yeah, I'm back. I'm excited. I'm not going to tell you too much about my plan on here so far because I don't want to. But you'll find it out soon. I'm interested to know, I wish you could answer, but I'm interested to know what your experience with that is. And I'll give you a little story and then I'll talk a little bit about how to reframe your movement practice. I'm going to start off with a very short version of my own story too. And I'm going to give you one example. Running was always something I started doing, I think in high school or grade eight, something like that. So I don't know, how old are you then? 13? Um, and I started it to lose weight. I went a little overboard with it. I'm not going to tell you any of those details because I don't want to give anybody tips, because it can be really triggering to hear specifics. But we'll just say that I took it to like a whole other level of toxic relationship with movement then. This was like throughout one of my eating disorders that I had in high school off and on again. So when I started running, it was because I hated my body and I wanted it to change. And it was out of shame when I ate food or to earn food or whatever. And as time went on, although I did notice in other areas with like weightlifting and yoga and that kind of thing, I noticed those things had a big impact on my mental health. There was still really big undercurrent of that same hate because you walk on this, the whole thing. If you like walk on the path for so long, it's like a formed path, and it's really easy to slip back to it. You know what I mean? There's probably a better example or better analogy, but we'll just stick with that one. As my relationship with movement changed and I started to move for mental health and to ditch diet culture, I still found this weird struggle with running, even though consciously I was no longer moving my body because I hated it. I still had a lot of old thoughts stuck around running. And one of them was what running should look like for it to be valid. And I don't know that this is necessarily 100% from diet culture. I think that some of it might be from other things. But I definitely had this belief system that, you had to run fast. I had to run fast and it had to be half an hour or it had to be like running the whole time and you couldn't stop and all this stuff. And I would often start running and then stop shortly after, or I'd hurt myself. A few years ago, if you've known me for a while, you might remember when I had shin splints, which lasted for years because I overdid it and never really gave myself the time to heal. And so I would injure myself. And even after the shin splints started to go away, when I would start running, they would come back. And no matter what I did, I tried new shoes, I tried different pace, I tried all the things. They always came back. And it was frustrating and I would stop. And more recently, I started to run again, but this time I did a lot of self-reflection first. And also, I did a little bit more research first. So I found slow runners. That's what they're self-proclaimed slow runners on, social media and followed them. And I watched them run slow and talk about how it's okay to run slow. And I did I looked at people's experiences who had bodies that looked like mine and who maybe had histories with movement like mine, and saw that a lot of them had to run slower than they thought. And that's one of the main bits of advice I've heard from most runners is to run way slower than you think you should. Like so slow, and take breaks. And I think I saw this from somebody, but they just went for like a 1 kilometer run. And I have found, sorry that this is all over the place. I am kind of like that with the whole neurodivergent thing, but I was trying really hard to have this in linear order. Well, some of the point in my healing from diet culture and my eating disorder, I did figure out that move like cardio specifically is for personally helpful for high stress. Like if I'm having a really hard time, anxiety wise or depression wise or trauma wise, running or cardio of some sort is really, really, really helpful for me. And running is free because I'm running outside and I'm not making a lot of money right now. So that's perfect. So I decided with this little research I did and some of the self reflection, I kind of figured out that I was doing too much. And I was pushing myself too much too fast, too far too fast. So I set an intention to run 1 kilometer 3 times a week, go so slow and take breaks. I would have started with like 30 seconds running, a minute or 30 seconds walking, I can't remember, and go extremely slowly. I'm just running around where I live. Um, so it was kind of easier for me that way to put aside any feelings of embarrassment about how slow I'm going. Like I went so slow, it felt like I could walk faster, but that's kind of what you're aiming for, from what I understand. Now, I am not a running expert. Maybe that's obvious. um, and I actually found I was actually surprised at how much of a difference it made. Going slow, taking breaks, and setting a small goal. It felt honestly pretty fucking empowering. Like I did the first run and I was like, "Oh, 30 seconds is okay." Like, at first it feels like not not a long not a short time, but I finished the run and I was like, "Oh, I could do more." And that's apparently helpful when you're starting running because then you want to go back and you feel hopeful for the next one. So then, the next one I did it and I was the first time that I kept it consistent. I had it for a month. I did it for a month consistently, like every week, 3 times. And it's like not a lot of time in my day. It felt really good. I did end up sometime playing around with some of the intervals, like I would do longer ones or shorter ones. And I would go, different routes, but I stuck with it and didn't have any injuries. Was totally fine. And then I found for one week after this month, I didn't go for a run at all. It was like a week and a half to 2 weeks. I can't remember. I was in my luteal phase right before my period. I was feeling honestly super crappy, super exhausted and burnt out. And then after those, week and a half, I was like, oh yeah, I'll go for a run today. And then I went right back into it like nothing happened. I have never done that particularly with this kind of movement where it does have that history of diet culture behind it. For me, there's like not even a little bit of feeling of shame around missing a week and a half. Not even a little bit. It was like, oh, I must have needed rest. And then went right back into movement. How fucking cool is that? Granted, I've been through this kind of reclaiming process a couple times with different movement practices. So maybe it's partially because I have had a little practice with reclaiming and this is my work and I talk about it all the time and I help clients through with it all the time. So I basically have a ton of practice, but I thought that was really fucking cool. And I actually did notice a bit of like a difference physically in how I felt from it because, every length of movement practice is a valid movement practice. So that's my example. We're going to go based off of that reclaiming story for a second. And you might have your own thought of oh, this certain practice. Actually, before we even get to that, I just want to say out loud to you in case there's a voice in your head coming up with this. There's no rule that says you have to be a runner. You have to run, you have to do cardio. You don't actually like there's you can throw out the rules. You don't have to run if you don't like running. I don't like the process of leave. I didn't actually. I do like it now, but I didn't used to like the process of going out for a run. I loved how I felt after. And like I said, that was the main thing. The price of it and the effects it had on my mental health were my reasons why I was going. Um, Otherwise, if it didn't have that effect, I wouldn't do it. Don't do it if you don't like to do it. There's many other things you can do. So, if there's anything in your life that you have that should with, like I struggled with the should of running for a while. I feel like, oh, I should run more. I should run more. I should run more. I pushed myself and I pushed myself and it hurt me in one way or another and it was not productive. Your story of reclaiming doesn't have to be the same as mine. You don't have to have, had the should around running and then hated it and then ended up loving it and going out. Maybe that's not it for you. Maybe for you, you noticed that you hated it and then you stopped doing it and you started a movement practice that felt supportive. I know that sounds so easy. Let's go over a couple of steps for how to reclaim your movement practice. The first one is to notice any of the shoulds that come up. And this is an ongoing thing. Unfortunately, this is something you will continue to do, as I gave an example from my story. No matter how long you've been out of diet culture, like I've been out of it for at least 5 years now, 4 years, 5 years. And I just had this like revelation recently. There will always be more layers. And that's okay. It's totally exhausting and I get it, but it's okay that you have that. So notice shoulds that come up and challenge them. If you have that, I should go running, but you hate it before, during, and after, then stop. Give yourself permission to stop running, even if you think of it for like a month. Okay. And then experiment a little bit. What did you do for like how did you move your body when you were a kid that you like brought you joy? Was it like skipping rope? I bought like a skip bow thing this summer, which I then forgot about because I put it somewhere I couldn't see. um, did you love swimming? Did you love hopscotch or dancing? Or have you always wanted to try like, I don't know, archery or like whatever? Experiment a little bit. And it doesn't have to cost you anything. You could try practices. There's tons of things on YouTube. You can put on a song and wiggle around. Doesn't have to look like anything, but experiment a little bit and let it be fun and joyful. And while you're doing this process, notice how you feel before, during, and after. I'll give you a little recap of these steps, so don't worry. And I don't mean how you feel like just immediately after, but how you feel like how do you sleep? What's your mood like? How do you feel in your body? How do you feel within your relationships before, during, and after? You might write them down if that feels easy, and you might even do that before you get rid of the should practices. Like if you are right now running and you don't like it, and you're like, "Huh, maybe I will consider stopping it." But you still have like a run scheduled with your friend later. Maybe you notice these things and you don't make any changes first. You know what I mean? So let's recap that because I think I made it confusing. Notice the shoulds, challenge them, experiment, try to have fun with movement, or at least aim for movement you don't hate, and notice before, during, and after. Notice how you feel. Okay, you with me so far? One thing that can be helpful to notice when you're, paying a lot more attention to this is any kind of patterns that happen. Like I said, for me, cardio meant I felt way less stressed, or it really just helped me to cope with difficult times of my life. So I took note of it. Doesn't mean that I'm forcing myself to do that, but I'm just taking note. It's almost like you're building your tools. so that when you have a hard say for me, when I was having a hard time a couple of however many weeks ago that was, I was like, what are things that help me? What are things I can add in to feel better? And one of them was cardio. And it has actually helped. So you're noticing any patterns, noticing how you're feeling. And while we're here, before we wrap up, I want to give you a couple of reminders. What works for some people does not work for everybody. Your best friend might absolutely love going to the gym, lifting weights, and it might be so supportive and for them, and they do this practice like 3 times a week. They love it. It feels great. Maybe you hate that. Maybe it brings up a lot of feelings for you. Maybe it doesn't feel safe to go to the gym. Maybe it's just not for you. Maybe what works for you is doing a gentle movement practice, gentle yoga, stretches, little walks. Maybe it's like movement for 1 minute at a time, a couple times throughout the day. There's none of these experiences are wrong. They're just different for everybody. And I know that that's hard and I know it can be triggering if you're hearing somebody else's movement practice or you're hearing somebody else that does movement say more time in the week than you, but their practice is no more valid than your practice. They're just different. We go through seasons of our life. This is starting to sound a little bit extra, but might have a season of maybe for like, a year, 10 years of slow, gentle movement being the thing that feels so supportive for you and so helpful. It helps you feel great in your body. That's amazing. And then maybe you have another phase where you're like, no, right now I love dance. I love the faster pace, my heart pumping like that. I'm loving that. That's great too. One is not more valid than the other. And just because you move out of one phase doesn't mean you're not good at keeping up with it. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with you for putting one practice down for a little bit to do something else. You don't have to be consistent in a very strict sense. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with you if you take a week off or 2 weeks off or months off. There's nothing wrong with you if you were doing dance class every week, but then you couldn't afford to go to the classes and you got burnt out. So right now you want to do gentle movement. That doesn't mean you're not consistent. It doesn't mean you failed. This stuff is really emotionally loaded. And the last reminder I want to give you is that basically it's way more emotionally loaded than we give it credit for. Maybe not for everybody, but for anybody who has been through eating disorders, who has had a disordered relationship with movement or a toxic relationship with movement, or if you've just had a history of being in diet culture. It's much more emotionally loaded than we give it credit for. And we can be really hard on ourselves and assume it's us that's the problem when it's the system itself. It's diet culture itself that is the problem. It makes so much sense that you struggle to go to class, say go to the gym, when one of the steps, one of the first steps is to pick an outfit that you could potentially have to stare at yourself in the mirror for the next hour and that you have to like wear and like maybe the all the pants you have like fall down all the time, like roll down. Have you ever have that with like yoga pants? Or your sports bra is like itchy as heck, like mine currently. I need to get another one. Or it just you feel uncomfortable in your skin because everything is tight. Also, another thing, you can wear loose clothes when you're running or when you're working out or whatever. You don't have to wear tight clothes. Um, that's the first step. Like that's a hard first step, bro. Bro, sorry. My stepkids say bro all the time, and we say it ironically back to them. And now I'm starting to starting to say it. I'm usually very, very careful with any kind of gendered language. As you know, it's one of my well, if you're new, you don't know, but it's one of my um main anyway, something that means a lot to me and I'm passionate about. I guess this is just an example that we all make mistakes and then we apologize and move on. But um there's no there's no set rules, and that can be hard to notice too. Like, it's hard to have freedom when you're used to strict rules, because rules is almost like, oh, if I have to do weightlifting and I have to do running, then I'm just going to go weightlifting this day and running this day. Like, it's like kind of easier to plan, but the freedom is hard because you have to check in like, oh, what do I want to do? What the fuck? How you gonna answer that question? That's hard. So I guess even that's even the first step before getting dressed is like making that decision, putting it into your schedule, finding the time for it. Maybe you have to find a babysitter. Maybe you have to then get to the class. And then once you're at the class, you have to be seen doing movement, which is hard for a lot of people. And maybe there's mirrors and you have to deal with the mirrors the whole time. And you have to deal with maybe seeing your reflection in shapes that we don't necessarily take. And we don't necessarily look at ourselves that's like that intently for that long. And then maybe you have to deal with the fact that there's other people around you. And maybe you're worrying about them judging you. And then you have to be all sweaty. And sometimes it can be hard if our heart speeds up. And then we have to, deal with the fact of getting home and showering and trying to take those stupid yoga clothes off that are stuck to you. And that's more of a workout than the actual movement. And then, I mean, then it's basically done. But you see, that was a lot of explaining, right? That's a lot of stuff that we have to do. Yet we blame it on ourselves for not having enough willpower. Maybe the reason movement is hard has nothing to do with you. Maybe it has to do with the fact that we grew up in a toxic system. That diet culture is a sham. And you've been told your whole life that your body is the problem, and it's not. And it's brings up grief every time you have to go to the gym again because you have to deal with all of the shit that you went through in your life. All the times you went to the gym and someone said shit about you, or that you went to the gym for hate, or you were dealing with an eating disorder, or you were in a class and your teacher said some stupid comment about working off the Halloween candy. Or every time you put on yoga pants, you have to think about all of the other sizes you've ever worn in your life. It's okay if movement is hard, and it's okay to take a break from it, especially if you're wanting to reclaim it. It's so important for every one of these steps to try your best to be kind to yourself and empathetic and compassionate to yourself because this stuff is hard. As I said, I do this one on one. If you are wanting a little bit more support, you can find the link in the show notes, or you can send me an email, info@movewithbillie.com. I do sliding scale and I work online. If you're in person around Prince Edward County, Ontario, I can also do in person, but primarily do have all my one-on-one clients online right now. So if you want to work with me, if you want a little extra support for this, send me an email or check on my website for the sliding scale rates. Thank you for being here. Welcome back. I'm excited. If you have any questions for me, not necessarily to do with this topic, but any topic, feel free to send them in, info@movewithbillie.com. And I would love it if you could rate, review, and subscribe this podcast. If you could follow me on socials, I'm at Move with Billie on Instagram, TikTok, and I do have a Facebook page, Move with Billie. And newsletter would be amazing if you could sign up for that. If you go to my website, it'll pop up, movewithbillie.com. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. Bye.